Okay, bar graphs or bar charts, or as Excel calls them, column graphs, and as some people call them, histograms. But a bar graph isn't necessarily the same as a histogram. What we're going to see now is how to create a bar graph. We might see later on in a few chapters how you create a histogram, depending on whether I have time or not to create that particular chapter. But anyway, let's see how you create a bar graph in Excel. Much the same as with a line graph, what you do is you step into your data table. Once again, you should try to have column titles. It'll make your work much easier. Here I have what's going to go on the horizontal axis, which are the week titles, week 1, 2, and so on. And this is going to be my data, volume, and probably Excel is going to grab this one, running total anyway. We'll clean it off later. So what I do is I step on my table. I go into insert, and now I'm going to select right here from column or bar chart, which is this little button. I'm going to bring down the drop down, and I get these options: 2D column, 2D bar, or 3D bar. Once again, select the type of graph that's the simplest to view and that communicates what you need to communicate in the simplest manner possible. Don't use these 3D column charts just because you want it to look neat. You'll probably be doing something that people hate to look at. It's best to just use regular old 2D column charts. Now, there are several types right here. Depends on what you want. For example, this clustered column, it simply puts one data source next to the other data source along the bars. This one, for example, compares two data sources. It gives you more or less what the proportion of each one is. And for example, this column, it shows you what percentage of each week is volume and running total. In our case, the best graph for us is this one that's clustered column. So I'm going to select that one. And that easy, now I have a bar chart, just like that. Notice that I have here running totals. Now that's not something that I want on my graph. We'll see in a few chapters what the running total is for and how to include it, but right now I don't want to include it, so I'm just going to select these bars. Be careful that you select all of them. See, look at these little circles, they're all over the chart, whereas if I had selected only one bar, only one of them would have the two little circles. What I want is to select all of them right here. And I press the delete key, and now my chart includes only the volume data, which is what I want. Okay, things that we can do here. Well, of course, you add a chart element. We need to add a title for the vertical one, for the vertical axis. And we say this is sales volume weekly. And we're going to do the same with the horizontal axis title. Here, add title horizontal. And we're going to put that this is the week under study. Since I have only one data source right here, which is my weekly volume, I don't really need it to say volume down here. That's more than I need. Now I could move this around here to get it out of the way, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete it. I selected it and I pressed the delete key, and now I get only these bars. Now these bars look a little thin, and that's typical of bar graphs in Excel. Excel is going to give you the thinnest bars possible. Now most people are accustomed to seeing much thicker bars that limit one next to the other. So what I do is I'm going to select this, I'm going to right click the bars, and I'm going to select here which says Format Data Series. That's going to give me options for formatting my bars. And what I need to play around with are these two, series overlap and gap width. Normally what you need to do is set this gap width to a lower value. Notice that it's on 219%. I like to keep it around 10% or so. And that gives me much thicker bars that are much easier to read. See, just like that. Now, if I wanted to add the individual values that these things have, notice that right here I can read. This is the value 244. This one is 157. This one is 110. But say I wanted to add the values directly on my chart. Well, what I would need to do is select the chart, Design, Add Chart Element, and Data Labels. Data labels are the little texts which tell you what the value of each bar is. See? On outside end. And now this bar, which has a value of 64, says 64, 241, 151, 157, and so on. And in fact, look at what happens if I take my 241 and I change it to 175. My graph is going to update and the label is going to update to 175. Now another thing I might want to do is add a little vertical line here to separate this axis. I can do that in Design, add Chart Element, and Axis. Now I have horizontal and vertical right there, and I go to More Axis option, and I can add, for example, a line which says solid line, and that's going to add a solid line to my horizontal axis. Now let's try it on the vertical one. Add Chart Element, Axis, primary vertical, More Axis options, and I'm going to select my vertical value axis, and I'm going to say that the line is solid, and I want it to be black, like that. And now I have a vertical solid line which separates these axis values from the chart area. It's a little bit neater, a little bit nicer to read. Now another thing you can do on bar charts if you want is to add a trend line, which is a little line that represents what your data is doing on average. You can do right here, add chart element, trend line, and you can select what kind of trend line you want, either a linear, exponential, linear forecast, moving average, things like that. Now normally 90% of the time what you need to use is linear, because statistically most tendencies behave in a linear fashion, or at least you can't really justify that a tendency is going to behave in a way that's not linear. So the best way is to use linear trend lines if you have to use them. Okay, normally you don't use trend lines unless you're doing a specific trend line analysis. This is how you create a bar graph in Excel, and those are the different options that I just showed that you can play around with in order to get the chart with the look that you want. Of course, there's much more options here in the design and format menus. Play around with them, see which ones you like and which ones you want to ignore. Thanks for watching this video tutorial. If you liked the video, be sure to subscribe to our channel and to visit our website, cubicleoverlords.com, for more instructional videos like this one.